it made me realize how much I usually do that work. It made me realize the emotional work that has taken for me to date men around my own age. I had no appreciation of that until I started to date younger men. And it was like, I didn't have to do all the work.
Welcome to Your Second Act, the podcast that proves that life doesn't have to end at 40, 50, or even 60, because when it comes to living your best life, age is just a number. Hi, gorgeous. Welcome back to another episode. Now, this year, I have set myself a podcasting goal. And yes, that is something. After nearly 3 years of podcasting, I would absolutely love to get Your Second Act podcast into the top 5% in the society and culture category. But in order to do that, I need your help. I truly believe that the stories that we're sharing here really matter, and I believe these conversations deserve to reach more women. So if this podcast has resonated with you in any way, it's helped you, inspired you, or simply made you feel a little less alone in midlife, I would be so grateful if you could just take a moment to rate and review and share it with a friend. These small actions make a huge difference and it really helps this community grow. So if you could do that, I would really, really appreciate it. Now, let's get into today's episode. Imagine finding yourself dating again in midlife. And let's be honest, what we hear about online dating is often enough to make us want to delete the app before we've even downloaded it. Ghosting, breadcrumbing, apparently that is a thing. Men holding fish in profile photos. Yeah, that doesn't really sound great, does it? It can feel like a whole new world out there. And now you'll often hear a lot of women say, I love being single, that for the first time in their lives, they don't have to consider anyone else. And yes, for some women, that freedom feels incredible. But not every midlife woman feels that way. Many of us still enjoy the idea of connection, of companionship, of finding that someone who might fit our next chapter. So, what happens when midlife women step outside the usual dating rules? What happens when you realize that you're no longer vibing with men your own age and you find yourself being drawn to the younger man? And let's be honest, I'm sure at some point you've seen an attractive younger man and quietly thought to yourself, I wonder what that would be like. Well, today's guest, Cassandra, didn't wonder. Cassandra is in her early 50s and found herself drawn to dating younger men, men in their 30s, because she genuinely prefers the dynamic of what it brings to her life. She's here to spill the tea, answer the questions we're all thinking, and share what this experience has taught her about confidence, attraction, emotional connection, and dating differently in midlife. Now, let's get straight into my chat with Cassandra. Cassandra, take me back to where you were in your life when something started to shift in your dating scene. Was there a moment when you realized that dating men your own age just wasn't doing it for you anymore?
Thanks, Michelle. There was actually, I had decided after a break to go back into the dating scene, and I went to an organized event and I met a fellow who was a year older than me, and we went on a couple of dates. And I noticed that there were some similarities in the way we were interacting and his personality that reminded me of the things that, to be honest, I didn't like in other men that I dated. So they were, for example, that he just assumed that after in the first date that we were going to be together without really knowing who I am.
Mhm.
He wasn't really much curiosity about who I am as a person. He just kind of expected me to fit into this particular mold or this image of someone who was going to look good next to him, with very little kind of foundation to back that up, and was sort of ready to go into the next stage. And I know from experience that that's not how to develop a lasting connection.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
after that, yeah, I took a step back. I took a step back after that, and I thought, yeah, I'm seeing this pattern, and it's not suited to me. Mm.
So you have been married previously. So you were
I
in
had.
a committed relationship with, I'm assuming, someone around your own age. But
Yes. Yeah.
like all of us, I guess we grow up thinking that we're going to end up with someone who is pretty much around our age. But as we get older, and this is what's so interesting, this is why I loved our conversation, things start to shift. And from what you were saying, when you start to online date or meet men of our own age group, I think that's where we start to question ourselves. And I think I would say, I mean, obviously I have not dated in like 27 years, but listening to other women that are out there on the dating scene, you really start to question yourself and what it is that you want. And because we have
Mhm.
lived experience, those red flags start to appear. But it's interesting what you were saying before, how he just expected you to fit into what he thought was a normal relationship and, and let's run off into the sunset together without even wanting to know much about you. That
Mm.
really shocks me, especially I I would say that he's probably come from previous relationships as well. So you think that he would want to know as well, because this is not
Yeah.
about man hating or anything, but it is just
Mhm.
it's quite interesting, isn't it?
It really is. I think there's two aspects to it, Michelle. I think firstly, like you've said, as we become older and we mature, we get a clearer sense of our own self and
Mm,
what doesn't suit us. So as you say, I was able to see quite quickly that that wasn't going to work for me. And when I did become a little bit vulnerable during conversations, sometimes it was brushed aside quite quickly, and he wasn't really interested in that emotional connection. Um, and also, I think that there's an assumption, and I see this as a cohort of perhaps older men who, certainly in Australia, have an assumption that women are going to fit in with them. I mean, that's how a lot of men were
mm,
raised. They were raised to think that that was our role to make their lives comfortable at work and in their personal lives. And in fact, that's how I was raised. I was raised with that very concept myself, like most women were. We
of
were
course.
raised, subconsciously or otherwise, to think that's our job to make men feel comfortable and help them succeed.
It's correct.
And
It's a bit
I certainly
nuts, isn't
experienced that.
it? When you say it like that, you think,
It
what the
is a
hell?
little nuts. It is a little nuts, and
Yeah.
thankfully, it's changing.
Mm,
Yeah, I think this particular fellow was a product of his age, really, in terms of that he was tall. When he was younger, he was tall, dark, and handsome, and he just expected that that was the way things were and never really questioned it because that's the way things had been.
yeah.
And he'd been supported in his career to rise the ranks, you
Yep.
know. And I find younger men have a much different perspective and outlook on the world and towards women.
Okay, so let's
Mm.
start there because this is what this
Yeah.
conversation is all about. Not about the man our age, it's about the younger man. And it's very interesting and I can't wait to hear your perspective on it all. So take me to the time where you first encountered going out with someone who was much younger. So can I ask how old that person was?
Mm. When I arrived in Sydney 8 years ago, I was on online dating at that time. I'm not now, and I was approached by younger men in their 20s,
Wow.
in their early 20s. I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I thought it was a joke at first that they were. I thought that can't be right. There's such an age gap, but there wasn't. And that was the first time I dated men who were younger. That was a while ago. And then more recently, once I took that step back, that I mentioned, I wasn't looking, I wasn't really interested. I was focusing on building my business. And I happened to be asked out by three men in their mid to late 20s. And I found there were definitely some similarities in them. Firstly, I liked the way that they asked me out. They were more focused on, we had a great conversation first for some hours. And then they asked me out. They were curious about me. They wanted to know who I was as a person. They read my responses. They read my body language, my nonverbal cues. I didn't have to explain everything to them, in that they were able to tune in quite quickly to me. And I think that younger generation are more attuned to other people's emotions and reading their energy rather than themselves and how the world fits. So yeah, that was refreshing. And the conversations, Michelle, there was just so much clarity in
Wow.
in the quality of the conversations. It was like if either of us had a question, we'd just ask it. So what are you looking for? What do you want? It was pretty clear. There weren't really any games. It was like, why don't we start dating like this and then see how it goes and check in after a couple of months. I mean, I just found that so refreshing, and it made me realize how much I usually do that work. It made me realize the emotional work that has taken for me to date men around my own age. I had no appreciation of that until I started to date younger men, and it was like I didn't have to do all the work.
Wow.
I didn't have to manage, poor behavior. I didn't have to think, oh, should I address that comment that wasn't really nice or was designed to put me down, or do I just let it go because I'm really tired? It was just those constant self dialogue that I'm used to having, to make
Yeah.
sure sometimes as well that men tend to react and get angry if they don't get what they want, and they're used to getting what they want in life. And behind closed doors in their personal life, a lot of men can they're quick to anger, and they're
Yeah.
quick to blame. And that as well is something that I'd learned to kind of try and avoid over time,
Yep.
so then that creates a people pleasing aspect. I don't want to operate like that. So I didn't have to do that.
I
Mm.
wonder if it's got to do with a generational thing or the fact that a younger man doesn't have the emotional baggage of a man, let's say, in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So are
Mm.
they coming into it looking at it very differently because they don't have the experience to say that, I guess, they have those opinions on how a relationship should be? Are they just coming in with it with fresh eyes? And you being that much older, are they seeing it in a different light? I mean, this is
Mhm.
what I find really interesting, because I would think, why would someone younger, a lot younger than me, why would they want to date someone like myself in their 50s? What is it that they achieve? What do they get out of that situation?
Mm. Great questions, Michelle. So, firstly, yes, I think there's definitely, I mean, these are men that don't have children and large mortgages and
Mm,
all the responsibilities that older people do. So they don't have that level of day-to-day stress. And they're also generally they haven't been worn down by really toxic work systems, for example, like corporate systems that do wear people down. And there's no question it ages people faster, in my opinion. Um, so there is a lack of emotional baggage. I think generationally, that's a really good point. And I was discussing this with a good friend of mine, a guy who happens to be a psychiatrist. Um, and he's just started dating. So we often swap stories. And I put this to him. I actually said to him, I've been dating men in their 20s. And I said to him, "There's so much," and he put words in my mouth, "nicer to you?" And I said, "Yes, yes, they're just so much nicer to me." And I said, why is that, do you think? And in his opinion, he's in his 50s, as well. He said that there's a wave of child abuse in the 60s and 70s where it was completely acceptable for children to be abused at home, at school. It was a different world.
yeah.
And then men were also taught to, in that context, shut down from their emotions. And when men are disconnected from their own emotions and they can't feel them, they can't connect with women's emotions
No.
because it feels unsafe to them. So of
Mm.
course you sort of get those walls of that kind of blank-faced, I mean, that kind of cold, I find somewhat cold, detached, aloof, personas that I see in a lot of men my age when I'm out and about. And if I simply smile at a man in a friendly way, they'll simply just look at me stony faced and then look away. Um, yeah, so there's a generational dynamic for sure, less emotional baggage. And honestly, Michelle, I simply think that younger generations now, they seem highly accelerated to me in
Yeah.
terms of their intelligence intellectually. And these men that I dated said that they find people their own age boring. And that was part of the appeal, is that they're talking about things like, one was an AI engineer, another one was running an arm of a multinational business for his family in APAC. Another one had won an Obama Foundation scholarship and was a lawyer. I mean, they're bright
Yeah.
men.
Yeah.
And so they're looking for that depth of conversation as well. They're not interested in, yeah, sort of,
Yes.
so, more
Yeah.
superficial topics. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that worked well for me because I enjoy that as well. Mm.
Absolutely. I would also say, as probably a lot of other people would question, do you think young guys who are attracted to older women possibly have what they coin the mummy issue label? Are they looking for some type of maternal figure in that situation?
Mm. Mm. In some cases, yes, that's for sure. And I've discovered that dating a 32-year-old, asking him some questions and joining some dots about his own mother. I realized his mother was quite emotionally um, closed off or detached from him. And in my opinion, he was looking for that connection from an older woman as a substitute. In terms of the other men that I've dated, I think that they value maturity. The ones that I've mentioned are they're fairly stood up in their own lives, and they're quite remarkably well traveled for their ages. They're either from other countries or have lived and worked in other countries. So I think it was more, and they thought I was younger than my age as well, initially when they met me. But I think age was, to be honest, less of an issue for them, in that they saw me as a person, and I didn't
Yeah.
have to explain all of myself to them. I didn't have to put up boundaries. They just saw me, you know. Oh, you're a fairly authentic person. Oh, I can see that you've got integrity, and I really like how you do what you say you're going to do, and you seem really creative. That's a really creative thing you've just suggested. And I'm like, oh yeah, yes, thank you for seeing me. It's really nice. Hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting
Hmm.
you say that because I can see I have daughters in their 20s, and when I
Mhm.
obviously speaking to them and speaking to their friends, they are such interesting people, even though they're young and they haven't had a lot of lived experience compared to myself. But just the way they question life, they see life is very different to the way I used to. And I know times have changed. So I can see how that is an attraction as opposed to
Mm.
maybe dating someone our own age who might not have that zest of curiosity. And especially I think it's so sad that someone isn't invested in getting to know you. It's like they're so shut off. It's like, well, okay, we're generalizing. I'm sure not all men are like that in midlife, but it really does. I think it's disappointing actually that it
Yeah.
takes someone younger to make you realize. And this is what I was going to ask you. Do you think dating younger men has changed the way you see yourself as a midlife woman?
It has, Michelle. It's shown me, firstly, what's possible in terms of having a genuine emotional connection with someone, which I've never had the experience of being with someone who I'm physically attracted to and
Mm,
there's an emotional connection. It's always been one or the other. Yeah, I find that younger men definitely have a greater level of curiosity for life and an inquisitiveness, more of a global perspective on things in
mm,
general. They've grown up in a world that's
yeah,
globally connected, and so their outlook is automatically bigger picture. I've found. And so that tends to pique their curiosity about me as well. And they want to know who I am and what my interests are and what I've done with my life. And I don't get those kinds of questions from older men. And I think there's another element, and again, this is a generalization, but for me, in my experience, it's been loud and clear, Michelle, and that is that I find men my age are generally selfish. And by that, I mean, again, it's how do I fit with them? This is what I do. This is my schedule. This is what my kids do. This is what we don't do. Um, and I've realized I used to try and take it upon myself to make that all work and try
Yeah.
and fit and bend, and of course there needs to be some compromise. Of course, children come first. I totally understand that. But also I have needs. And if I'm going to be in a relationship with someone, I need to be respected and have the things that women need to feel supported and loved. And I haven't had that experience yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think that younger men they're more flexible. They can be, but they're just more able to adapt to different people and situations. I think it's not so much about they haven't grown up in a world, particularly for men that may be more affluent with particular job titles, where the world, comes to them
Yeah,
basically, and that
exactly.
creates a mindset that women are a part of that world that comes to them and makes it work for them.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is they just want a replacement from what they had. So obviously the ex-partner fit into their schedule, that's no longer around. So you've got to, if you want to be with me, you've got to fit in with me, which is completely bloody selfish. So yeah, I can understand what you think they are. That's selfish. So going back to dating the younger man, what happens when emotions set in? And I guess we have to be realistic. Are these men, these younger men, interested in having a long-term relationship with you?
It's been yes and no, to be honest. Generally no, in that probably but most of them have wanted to have children, and that's fair enough, and they should
Yeah.
have children, that experience of fatherhood, and I'm obviously at a different stage of life. Other men that I've met, particularly in the United States, for example, where life is different, have not, in their late 30s, have no real desire to have children, because they see it as a burden, and a very difficult thing to achieve in today's world. But happy to have kids in their life in other ways. So in terms of the longer term, there hasn't been a longer term relationship. There's been short term relationships. However, the experience for me has been so helpful for me to have the contrast. I needed to have that contrast. I needed to be with men who saw me, who respected me, who treated me well, who I was attracted to, who I could have interesting conversations with. Um, yeah, yeah. And it's made me realize that life is short.
Yeah.
Life is short, and to go with my instinct in those situations, even though in my head I was, I thought, oh, this is wrong. This isn't right. I'm too old for these. I'm too old for these men. I mean, all the constructs that we're raised with, Michelle, about
Absolutely.
it's okay for men to be with women half their age, but
No.
not many women do. Opposite. It's changing, but it's very
Yeah.
unusual. And
Yeah.
I mean, we get, a couple of men I've dated when we went out, actually majority, we'd get reactions from time to time. But neither of us cared. I mean, look, we're both adults, and obviously we can go out if we want to. But
Yeah.
it was interesting. Reactions from men were one of curiosity, and reactions from women were quite different.
Yeah. In
They're a
what
little bit more
way?
just open comments like that is just ridiculous, or
So
just
not favourable. The opposite,
no,
quite
non-favorable.
negative. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh God.
which,
Yeah.
I kind of expected, and it doesn't really faze me.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
I was going to ask you, what happens when you're in a relationship with a younger man and you're, say, you've been together for a while, and then you start to obviously meet each other's friends and family? How does that work?
Mm. In terms of meeting friends, it can be a little awkward, in that people come with their own judgments,
Mm.
and we both let our friends know that the other person is a lot older or younger. And I find that the good friends don't. They
Okay.
park all their judgments, and it's just, after the ice is broken, we just socialize as normal. So yeah. Mm.
Okay. And what about
Mm.
your friends? How have they reacted to you dating the younger man? They're probably
Mm.
high-fiving you.
They actually, I've had a lot of support.
Yeah, I can
Well,
imagine.
I've got my friendship circle is small, but it's
Mm.
also close. So my friends know me really well, and how I operate, and yeah, I don't judge them, and they don't judge me either,
Okay.
generally. Um, so yeah, like they treat the men that I'm dating like they treat anyone else I'm dating. Yeah.
But what about
Mm.
parents, when parents start to have an influence? And I can imagine
Mm.
for the younger man, have you encountered that at all?
I haven't yet. No,
Okay.
I haven't got to the introductions with parents at this
Yeah.
point. Mm.
Wow.
Mhm.
So, moving forward, you're obviously still interested in pursuing dating younger men. What happens when you're looking for something long term? I mean, how do you protect yourself? Because if you're saying a lot of them obviously want to have families, that's not something you can offer them. Is it all about just waiting for the right man to come along to see if that man fits your life and it'll eventuate into something? Because I would worry personally that I would just get so heartbroken time and time again. I mean, how do you protect
Mm.
yourself that way?
Mm. You can't basically. And I mean, like most of us, I've had my heart broken many times by men around my age who have betrayed me, betrayed my trust, or led double lives. To be honest, that's been those situations have been devastating.
Yeah.
And as soon as I realize what's going on or ask questions, the rug is just suddenly pulled from underneath me. So I've had a lot of that experience, and I find that with the younger men I've dated, I can be more vulnerable. I actually feel my nervous system feels safer with them because I find they're generally not judging me all the time. I'm finding I don't have to. There's not some weird, shady behaviors or half truths that start to crop up that I sort of try and put to the back of my mind that make me anxious. It's I just don't experience that, and it's just clear. It's like, are we seeing other people or are we not? No, okay, great, that works for both of us. All right, so then the next step is this. Um, and always communicating. And because they read me so well, they ask me questions too, like, "Oh, you look a little anxious at the moment. Is everything okay?" So we kind of I actually find that scenario, and knowing that if it is short term
Yep.
and it comes to an end, and yeah, it does hurt, and I open my heart, and I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve
Mm.
as a person. It does hurt, but I get so much out of the experience, and I'm so practiced, I think. I got practiced at working through the heartbreak and seeing it for what it is, and it's like there was no malicious intent, which there has been in the past. I'm so used to that nasty, malicious,
Mm.
orchestrated, calculated betrayal. That's what I'm used to. So clear, transparent conversations with integrity with someone who cares about me and treats me with
Yeah,
respect.
of course.
We decide to go our separate ways for life circumstances. I figure I would rather have that experience and the quality of that connection than not.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
it's showing me more, Michelle, of what is possible. Like if that, I figure if that becomes my norm and my nervous system starts to get used to letting men in who I read as being, reasonably safe, I can be vulnerable with, it's showing me I need to see that. I need to have these experiences
Yeah.
rather than this kind of, back history that um, I don't want to have anymore. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
gosh, that really that surprises me again because obviously I've been with the same person for a long time, and I don't. Yeah, it surprises me, and it doesn't that men of our age are still like that. But you would
Mhm,
think that by now, through
mhm,
experience, that they'd
mm,
be changing their point of view. I mean, how? So then, the younger woman that they meet, let's say they meet someone in their a woman in their 30s, and I wonder how she would react to a man in their 50s and 60s. They probably have no hope in hell because why would she put up with that?
A lot of women do that I observe. Um, they're looking for, they see security as older,
Yeah.
more powerful women. I mean, sorry, men,
Financial,
and often men,
probably. Yeah.
even when they're not, they'll present themselves that way and they'll talk the talk, and they often that's not what it seems, or they've got really nice, fancy sounding titles, which are no way correlated to their actual actual capability in a lot of situations. But that's
Yeah.
that's the work world.
But when you're young, you
Um,
fall for that. You think that's really
yeah,
impressive and
yes,
valuable.
yes,
Mm.
and maybe that's also a bit of a surrogate father figure.
Yeah,
Maybe
true.
that's a dad that wasn't around that they're looking for, an older man to give them some
Mm.
attention. So there could be that element as well. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's a luxury in not having to, like you said, take stock and change yourself.
Mm.
When we get to our age, for people that don't do that, it's because they don't have to. They don't
No.
have to because there's no consequences to their behavior. They can keep doing what they like.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're protected in some form or another. No
Mm.
one's actually
Yeah.
held them to it. There's no real accountability. So, yeah.
Yeah. When we caught up a while ago, you mentioned how Australian men are very different to, say, American men. And I couldn't
Mhm.
understand why. But yeah, I'd love you to, yeah, say it again because that was really, really interesting. Just the difference in
Yeah.
approach as well. So that's why I think, well, no wonder women
Mm.
find it so bloody hard to date in Australia.
Mm.
So what have you found so different with American men, for example?
Right. A lot. So firstly, different cultures.
Yeah.
Different cultures. Americans are much more expressive. They introduce themselves, they talk to strangers. People talk, generally communicate with each other. Australia, we're much more reserved. We're much more closed off. In a city like Sydney, people in particular are much more emotionally, they like to keep their distance. Um, Conversations are closed down pretty quickly. Just general day-to-day conversations you might have with people you meet in the street or
Mm.
strangers. They're very perfunctory and very short. So there's the cultural aspect. And secondly, I find in the US that the arrogance that I see in a lot of, to be honest, this is my opinion, in a lot of Australian men, a lot of men who are more affluent, there's a degree of arrogance. And I say this having worked with men for 30 years
Yeah.
in different organizations and in my personal life. There's a certain untouchability because we're comfortable as a country, we're affluent as a country. Usually they work their way up the ladder half the time because of their gender, not because of their talent or capability. And there's an arrogance, there's no question about it. And I just don't see that arrogance in white men, in Latino men, or in black men in general in the United
Mm.
States, because if that arrogance won't get you very far, particularly if you're in a minority or part minority population. If you're not emotionally intelligent, you will get stepped on and shoved aside and left behind. So you need to be switched on. And that means reading people. And so younger men, like the guys in their 30s that I meet generally, or who ask me out, I get asked out a lot in the United States. I rarely get asked out in Australia.
When you say you get asked out, so you could be out in a bar, a restaurant, whatever, and they will approach you. Not talking online.
Mhm.
Yeah, wow.
Yep. So it's whether it's, I'll go to a cafe. I met a fellow in San Diego, like 11 o'clock in the morning, grab the last seat. He was actually talking to a friend of his, and he said, look, I would rather talk to this beautiful woman sitting right here. I smiled at him, so I given him a cue. Much rather be talking to her, man, than talking to you. So, and then the guy was like, yes, fair enough. We just walked out, and we just started talking for hours, and then we met up and had a date later that night, and
Wow.
we're still in touch. It was a really nice, yeah, really nice thing to happen. But that for me happens all the time when I'm there. Yes, I'm traveling. Yes, I've got more time.
Yeah.
I acknowledge that. But if I smile, I didn't experiment. I smiled at a man at one of our local bars down the road when I got back, and it was just a smile. And it was an Australian man who was probably in his early 50s, and he just looked at me up and down, and he kind of went like this, like, "What are you doing?" And just looked away. And I thought, wow, it was just such a contrast to men being more open and curious. And if they like you, and you start talking, they will say, "Hi, and I'm Stephen. It's really lovely to meet you. And you new in town, or what do you? Oh, I'm a couple of hours later, you're being invited to their friend's birthday party the next night. It's just people are much more
Mm.
social, open, and inclusive.
I was going to say, I think this conversation's going to make a lot of women buy a ticket to America.
Recommended.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. But
Yeah.
you kept on saying it, emotional maturity, emotional intelligence. There is a lot to be said about it. And I think that's where
Mm,
a lot of people go wrong because they don't have it. They're still little kids trapped in adult bodies and they're like throwing all the toys out of the pram when, get real, we don't act like that anymore. So no wonder the rate of divorce is,
yeah.
soaring. And and women in midlife are getting to this point and going, I don't want to put
Mm,
up with this anymore.
mm,
Why should I?
mhm.
And we're becoming more empowered. So that's why I think it's amazing. And if you can meet someone who's younger and he's really interested in you and what you have to offer and your perspective on life,
Mhm.
it's so nice. Isn't it nice when someone's really interested in you? And I'm not even talking
Yeah.
about in a romantic sense, but I think everyone is in such a hurry and they just want like little bits of you. It's like you feel like you
Mm,
need to
mhm,
hand something over and give them a bio in 5 points and then let's move on.
mm,
Life's become like that.
mm.
So when someone really sits down and and actually takes the time to get to know you, it's actually very flattering. And I think there should be more of it in the world today. I think we're just too concerned about superficial crap, basically. It's like, let's get to know you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really understand why this works for you. Do you think that by being with a younger man, it's made you feel more attractive at all?
Yeah. It has, Michelle. It's definitely put a spring in my step. It's like my mojo switched back on. Yeah. So it's yes, it has. It has. I feel that you've probably seen that in me bouncing into the gym in the morning, but it's
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely has, and I can see that that's been part of the gifts of being with younger men. Is I feel desired and I feel appreciated as well.
Wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Mm.
we generally this is not a culture that does compliments. They're rare. Or they're more backhanded. And younger men, again, from different countries or Australia, have said, "Oh, they tell me they think I'm beautiful or whatever it is. They give me compliments on my appearance or
How it should be. How it should be. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, buy me flowers, do little considerate things. They notice what I do and don't like. So, oh, I noticed that you're not drinking right now, so we don't have to drink. That's fine. Or you mentioned that you like pink flowers, so I got you some pink flowers. That
Oh,
that kind of
wow.
thing. I don't have to, sort of hope to
Yeah.
get or wait to get something nice or hear something nice. It just happens naturally.
Wow. So
Yeah.
really paying attention to what you like and what you value. Yeah.
I
That's
tune in really
wonderful.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
So what would you say to a midlife woman who might be considering dating the younger man, but feels she doesn't want to be judged, she is fearful of it, also self-conscious of it? Like how
mm,
can she go about it?
mm. I think the more I hear what you're saying, and the more you accept yourself, and it is a cliche, but the more self-accepting you are of yourself as a person, the more likely you are to attract a younger
Mm.
man. And younger men are not as I mentioned, not as critical and judgmental as other men. So you might feel that you may not look amazing, but they will likely think that you do.
Yeah.
So because they'll appreciate you.
Yeah. So
Mm,
maybe just give it a go. And
absolutely give it a go. I
so
mean, yeah,
where do you meet these people? Like where how do you meet them?
I met one at a dating event for women over 40, men under 40.
Oh, that's a great idea.
That's what I thought. I'd never seen
Yeah.
anything like it. And I thought, look, you know, I haven't dated for a while. I'm just going to turn up out of pure curiosity and see what kind of men turn up.
Yep.
And that was walking into the room, again, a totally different experience, Michelle. It was questions. It was like, oh, hey, not just, oh, who are you? Have you been married? Do you have kids? What do you do for a living?
Ah,
It was much more, the energy in the room felt vibrant.
yes.
And it was just, they came up and introduced themselves to me, not men standing in the back, which is normally the case, standing in the back, chatting to their mates, looking at you, chatting to their
Yeah.
mates, or just standing in the back, skulking, drinking a beer, and kind of
Yes.
scanning and
Oh yeah.
hoping you'll come and talk, kind of thing. They just get on with it. And others I've met at walking groups of all things. So there's so many walking groups that do 12, 15K distances, for example. So often just hop on those. Yeah. And I find that attracts fit younger people as
Yeah.
well. Mm, mm.
Oh, and are you currently dating anybody?
No, no, yeah, slate's clean right now.
Okay.
So, yes, I'm focusing on work. And if the right person crops up and I'm interested in them, it'll be a yes, probably. Mm,
Oh, well, thank you for
mm,
giving us his perspective. I find it
no
really,
problem.
really interesting. I think it sounds refreshing. And I think it's all about really listening to yourself, what it is that you want, and not compromising yourself. Why should we? Too many years of doing that you don't need
Yeah.
to. And an age like my like my podcast says, age is just a number, and it obviously it
Mhm.
really is just a number, isn't it?
Absolutely is. And, age does not equal, as we know, wisdom, life
No.
experience, maturity. And I never expected to be dating younger men. Honestly, Michelle, it just didn't even cross my mind. And it just sort of started happening. Um, and I think it's an important part of my growth. I really do. So yeah, definitely encourage women and your listeners to be open to it.
Yeah, explore. You never know, do you? Why not? Makes a good story anyway, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It does. Sitting at a beachside restaurant with sand on your feet, talking to a young man from Sweden for 5 hours about
Oh,
all kinds
wow.
of interesting topics on a summer's night is a pretty good way to spend time, I think.
Yep,
Hmm.
yep. And I'm sure other women would be sitting around thinking, I want what she has. So, yeah. Love it. Well, I like to end all my episodes with an inspirational quote. Do you have one you'd like to share with us?
Michelle, I do. And I was looking at quotes, and I thought I'm just going to use the one that I've used. I've used this when I've mentored young women throughout my career. When they lack confidence or not sure what to do next or in
Below
jobs
their
that are way ability, and that is back yourself the way you'd back a racehorse.
Mm. 100%.
Just go for it.
Yep.
Mm.
And if you can't back yourself, then who the hell are you going to back? So you might as well back yourself. I love that.
Got to back yourself first for other people to back you. Yeah.
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 Oh,
Can do
that's
it. Women
lovely.
are so capable. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you and good luck in the future.
Thanks,
And
Michelle.
yeah, I can't wait to hear more about your next, well, whoever it is that you come across.
Adventure.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it, Michelle.
Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Your Second Act. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could rate and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to me.